All right, here we go. This 5 o'clock hour. Mike Heller, sports radio host. Heller and Davis on 97.3 The Game in Milwaukee. Also very much involved, entrenched in Wisconsin athletics as well. He joins us on Sikkim 365 Radio. Mike, I still got to start with this. You told me yesterday that you have plenty of time because you got like a 2-hour drive. Are you going up to watch the Ryder Cup or something? Where are you going?
I just can't. I'm coming back from the Ryder Cup. I did my show there earlier today, and I am on the road coming back from Whistling Straits, which is on the shores of Lake Michigan, back to my home in Madison.
We officially hate you because we would like to have been at Whistling Straits, and so I think this is the end of the segment because that's such a beautiful. It's my background on my laptop right now, by the way.
Yeah, that's a strong emotional reaction.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, he says that it's the collective we. I don't think that's necessarily true, Mike.
It's
well, good.
I am extremely jealous. God, that's great. Whistling Straits. We got a guy coming on with us from the Whistling Straits tomorrow, a PGA Tour analyst. So, what do you think? This is a young team, right? The U.S. Let's talk about it. They got to have a young team.
Yeah, it's a very young team. They just announced the pairings for the morning matches tomorrow in the foursomes, and interesting that and not surprised, Bryson DeChambeau is not in the morning pairings because that's alternate shot, and I think he plays the game at in such a way that I think alternate shot was a really good scenario to leave him out of. Now, I was talking to one of the BBC broadcasters this afternoon on my show, and one of the things we brought up is that the U.S. has far less experience, and he countered and said, listen, the U.S. players with experience, most of their experience has been losing, so it's probably not a bad thing at all to have moved into a much younger lineup. You know, Mickelson didn't have success, Tiger didn't have success, Furyk didn't have success, Kuchar didn't have success. None of those guys are on this Ryder Cup team. I think this young, very talented U.S. squad is really well equipped, and we'll see what the weather does over the weekend and how much the wind blows. That would give the Europeans a slight advantage, I suppose, if the wind really blew, maybe more accustomed to playing in those conditions.
All right, Mike, well, to Wisconsin now, and the Badgers and Notre Dame in Chicago this week. This is kind of one of those what it's all about games when it comes to college football. Notre Dame, I don't know if they've shown full Notre Dame or really what they are yet. Why do you feel about where Wisconsin is after the 2 games they've played?
Yeah, there's 2 things about Wisconsin. One, I trust their defense implicitly. Jim Leonard, who maybe could have been, well, certainly could have been, was the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator this year because I think Matt LaFleur and Jim Leonard, Matt was counting on Jim that he could talk him into taking the job. And Jim Leonard stayed at Wisconsin as their defensive coordinator. Their defense is really talented. They had an issue giving up some big plays in the opener against Penn State, but I think at halftime, Penn State had 1 first down. Wisconsin's defense can flat out play. The question is, can Wisconsin trust their quarterback, Graham Mertz, who took the job of Notre Dame's quarterback, Jack Cohn, from at Wisconsin, and then he transferred? So the question is, can Wisconsin not just pound the ball on 12, 15, 16 play drives, but can they hit some big plays? If they can, I think Wisconsin is better equipped to win the game on Saturday than Notre Dame is.
Mike, what do you attribute the lack of explosive plays per se to?
I think the quarterback, Graham Mertz, I think he's all up in his head a little bit. I think he's got a little crisis of confidence. He began last year in the COVID year with a ridiculous performance in a good way against Illinois. Then he got COVID, and when he came back, he was a shadow of what he was prior. And I also understand that there was an underlying injury. Well, then this year in that opening game, Wisconsin had the ball at the 2-yard line on first down and at the 1-yard line on first down in 2 possessions in the first half in which they didn't score. They didn't just settle for a field goal. They didn't score. They had 3 possessions inside the 10-yard line, of which they got 3 points out of, and then 1 touchdown. So that was an issue, and I think his issue is a big question mark right now in the program is, can they trust him? Can he possess the ball? Can he make the throw? all the things that a really highly regarded quarterback out of Kansas when he came out of high school, top 3 pocket passer recruit in the country. And he's not playing at the level they need him to play, and that's the big play issue.
Yeah, I enjoy watching. I know sometimes, and we the Big Ten, there are teams that can air it out, but I still kind of enjoy the old, just because maybe my age as well, just the old-fashioned sometimes football. Not that it can't be 40-35, but that's really Wisconsin's bread and butter, right?
My goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what they do. The natural resource here from a recruiting standpoint is big offensive linemen. I mean, that's the best natural resource with which to recruit in Wisconsin. And then they got to go get some talent at speed positions from other places. But they get offensive linemen and linebackers come from here. And Barry Alvarez identified that when he got here in 1990. And the best offensive linemen haven't left. And then they've had great running backs, but maybe not as good as they put up statistically because they were running in front of a really great offensive line. Wisconsin, the first 15 plays against Eastern Michigan, the only other game they played other than Penn State, the first 15 plays that they ran offensively were on the ground. So they know where their bread is buttered here. And I think they're going to have to mix it up tomorrow and open up a little bit offensively. But their goal is always going to be to pound on you and open some holes and let these running backs get some room to work, if not early, certainly late.
Do you think this Notre Dame team is vulnerable?
Yes. I mean, listen, Florida State was a little bit of a paper tiger. That was a really entertaining opening weekend game. I mean, I thought it was the best game, most fun game of the weekend. However, Florida State then lost in their ensuing game. Notre Dame had a really tough time with Toledo. They didn't put Purdue away until later. I think Notre Dame is gettable, and I also think it doesn't help them that they played 3 pretty tough games in 3 weeks. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they've got Cincinnati next week. I mean, that's a tough 5-game opening set. And I think they're not as good as the number indicates.
So, Mike, these are 2 teams with a lot of tradition. It should be an amazing atmosphere on Saturday, but not 2 teams that have played each other a lot. First meeting since 1964. What's kind of the buzz level for Wisconsin-Notre Dame for the first time in a long time?
Pretty high. I'll give you a really good example. So have had Barry Alvarez on my show earlier today. The buzz of this one is both college game day programs are there, Fox Big Noon Kickoff and ESPN's Game Day. They're both in Chicago for this game tomorrow. And then the Big Ten office reached out to see if Kevin Warren could be on my show. They reached out to us. So that's the concept of, I think this is the best game on the college football map Saturday. And it helps that there aren't many good games, right? And I think this one's elite. It's interesting because this game was supposed to be the second of the 2 matchups. Last year, they were supposed to play at Lambeau Field. They will. That won't happen until 2026 now because of scheduling conflicts. I think this is a significant college football matchup. It's important for the Big Ten, and I think it's really important for Wisconsin to win this game. Their season kind of takes a bit of a different turn if they don't. They get Michigan next week. But this is not just a big game. It's a big game that Wisconsin needs to win.
Yeah. You mentioned Lambeau Field. We have to ask you. It looked like the Packers were right back, especially when Rodgers started airing it out. We know their opening game was a disaster. He always seemed like about once or twice a year he has to calm the waters. Of course, I don't know if anything would have calmed the waters after how they played against the Saints, but have things settled down in Green Bay a little bit now after their win this Monday night against Detroit?
Yeah, and Rodgers had a little bit of an I told you so moment, but I think that the cynics, the skeptics, will say, well, that was against Detroit. Let's see what happens at San Francisco, which is next, then home with Pittsburgh. Sunday night, really early, right? We're not, that'll be the 3rd game of the season. Really early, it's kind of a litmus test. New Orleans game was just weird. The Packers had 2 offensive possessions in the first half. Never got in a rhythm. Their defense couldn't get off the field. The Saints were really ready to play. The Packers' game plan wasn't very good. Now they're going to play in San Francisco, Santa Clara, on Sunday night. This, to me, is the test. It wasn't against Detroit. I expected the Packers' offense to be really good, and they were. They scored on 2 of their 3 possessions, touchdowns in the first half, and then just ran roughshod in the second half. And Rodgers missed 2 deep, wide-open touchdown throws in the game. This one is the one I'm really interested in to see how they'll stack up against San Francisco. The Packers are banged up on the offensive line. San Francisco can get after the quarterback. Shanahan in San Francisco and Matt LaFleur in Green Bay are close friends, but Shanahan tried to steal their quarterback in the offseason. So I'm curious to how that might play itself out too. So a lot of moving parts in this one, really intriguing.
Well, if there's, I've covered the Cowboys for years, Mike, and if there's one team in the league that Aaron Rodgers seems to enjoy throttling more than the Cowboys, it is the 49ers because they snubbed him.
Yeah, all those years ago. He was asked earlier this week, did he think at some point in the offseason that he might be playing for San Francisco this year? And he chuckled, and he said, yeah, maybe a little bit. So, and I still think, all right, so nobody knows what this cat is going to do as he goes down the road. Aaron's he runs a little differently. But I still think he's going to play in San Francisco. So before it's all said and done, I think his affinity for the Bay Area, I think he'll end up playing in San Francisco.
All right, we go back to hating you again because you were at Whistling Straits. Well, this is something about Mike, and you don't know us at all, but we appreciate your time. It's a great segment in all different angles. Are you still an account executive? Are you still doing that as a part of your radio?
No, my wife and I opened a wine bar 2 years ago, just north of Madison.
Okay.
So I own a wine and bourbon bar, and I do my talk show daily out of Milwaukee and statewide, and then I work on the Badger football broadcast. And that's my week. Sunday I sleep.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you should. And, I just happened to see that. Maybe I was attached that you used to do that. We all sell some things with what we do as well, and it's also kind of a nice competitive thing. Hey, thanks, Mike. Great stuff. Absolutely. Good luck. Enjoy the weekend in Chicago and also with the Packers as well. Thank you.
Very much. Enjoyed it.
That's Mike Heller. Packers did finally kind of unload with the deep throws and eventually blow out Detroit. We discussed that. A couple of throws that Rodgers made insane. That's Mike Heller on Wisconsin and Notre Dame. Coming up on, and how about that? Chicago last year supposed to be Lambeau. And that's what Pete Sampson mentioned about Notre Dame. That's why they love being independent, because they can do that.
Yeah, and Chicago is the greatest sports town in America. I mean, there's other, I mean, you can try and compare, but Chicago is a town full of people who love sports, who get sports, who want to be at events, who they know how to put things on. They got a lot of problems in Chicago, but sports fandom is not one of them.
Well, hopefully sports fandom allows them to get away from all the other problems they have. But some of my favorite trips were Chicago. Being at Soldier Field when it's snowing. Being at the draft. I love the city, just the personality of the city. All right, when we come back, 5:20.